Please check out our sponsors NordVPN for the best in online security. It's the best VPN on the market, and you can try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee by visiting nordvpn.com/heartandhand. That's nordvpn.com/heartandhand, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and as always, I am your host. And I thought this week we would be talking about Rangers' fairly nondescript 2-1 victory at home to Livingston on Saturday. But as can often happen in the world of Rangers, that has been superseded with the somewhat seismic news out of Ibrox this morning that Rangers have parted company with Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart. And not merely that both are leaving their positions, but Rangers at pains to let the world know that both have been dismissed from their positions. Joining me to discuss this is, first of all, David Graham.
Good afternoon, Davey. Good afternoon, listeners.
And making a welcome return to the pod after a couple of months away is Alan Bradley.
Yeah, good afternoon. Happy Monday. Good to be back, yeah.
Yes, and I think we might be stepping on the reputations of the late and not much lamented two that have departed from Ibrox. I'll just come straight to you then, Davey and Alan. Start with you, David. What's your initial reaction to this news?
Well, look, I think, Davey, you and I had made our opinions on both individuals very clear. Andrew Cavenagh probably summed it up well when he said something, and I paraphrase, when we look at what we want from an executive, pretty much Patrick and Kevin aren't that.
Yeah.
I think that although, of course, I am pleased, it should have happened after the transfer window shut, if I'm quite honest. It should have happened when Russell Martin left, but I think better late than never. I think what it does do in balance is raise some question marks, if I'm honest, around, the ownership and how it's been kind of allowed to drag on until then. And I'm sure we'll get into the nitty and gritty, but I assume it's because the message from Patrick Stewart, well, the Americans put you in charge, Patrick. Everyone going okay? Yeah, all good, boss. Until they've arrived over themselves and seen firsthand that it's not. I'm going to hazard a guess, and I genuinely have no information, bar I think a lot of us assuming Danny Rose come in and looked at the squad and thought, what the hell's going on here? And I think he's probably given an honest assessment. And I think if we're quite honest, look, we've got Danny Rose. I like Danny Rose. We will support him, albeit, I mean, Saturday, we weren't leaving the ground full of hope, but, a win's a win. But what I would say is, and I'm a man for always looking forward rather than back. There was clearly an absolute shambles around the appointment of a manager, or the appointment of Danny Rose, and it feels to me that, as I said, I hope it's not too little, too late, but it is very much too late, and I think now, as I say, although the Americans may think, well, that relieves a bit of the pressure, for me it actually sharpens the focus on them, because I think now, you've done the right thing getting rid of them, but what's the plan from here? And I suppose ultimately proof of the pudding will be in the eating.
Alan?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Absolutely. I'm never happy when Rangers have to sack, whatever, but it was absolutely on the cards. It should have been done so much earlier. I do think that the actual owners, who took over, I mean, I went to sleep, David, probably maybe about May or June, and was just so optimistic and thought...
Is that why you've been away? That you just up?
Really, it was the Oval. I put too much in the Ovaltine, David. I need to cool down a wee bit. But I mean, basically, at that point in time, it was like, this is just going to be the greatest thing. We've got the kind of new owners in, financially will be better, and it'll go from there. And I probably woke up now optimistic at probably about the back of 11ish, David, when this broke. because it's just been a nightmare. I feel that they've actually underestimated Scottish football like so many other people have done, whether it's players like Joey Barton and all the other. We just come up there, it'll be a piece of you know what. And
Yes.
and I think the way they've, I think even Cavenagh as well, okay, who's done a lot of kind of good things, but I think, okay, you can go to so many big games and you can watch Rangers and so on, but you really don't get it. And I don't think domestically as well. I just thought they picked Russell Martin too. The vast majority of us, it certainly wasn't our choice. I was one of well, we need to give the guy time. But after just several weeks, David, it wasn't working. But to me, the mistake, Kevin Thelwell too, obviously we'll get onto him and Patrick, which is the kind of main one. But it's just a complete kind of underestimated Scottish football on, by the way, Rangers. I think Big David hit on a really good point as well. And I would imagine the investors too behind them, there'll be pressure on Andrew Cavenagh and Parag Marathi as well now, as to what was going on. And I do think this is actually it isn't a case of, well, that's fine now, but there'll be more of a focus on them. Credit to them for putting their hands up now and saying, okay, we have got it wrong, with obviously with Kevin Thelwell and Patrick Stewart, the Martin one as well. So kind of credit to them for kind of doing that. But my kind of last one before I let you all go in is the idea is on Saturday. I think before I was going to come on, before this broke, it was going to be the only positive I've got, David, and I'm looking for it, is I think the new manager that came in has done brilliant with what he's inherited. He's inherited the biggest lot of shite, for years, and I thought he's done really well. He does show he can organise a team, he can motivate them. To get the 4 consecutive domestic wins was brilliant. But all that I had in the back of my mind is we need to do something in January. But while Thelwell was still there and Stewart, I just didn't have any confidence whatsoever. We wouldn't just waste more in January and potentially in the summer. So for the two of them now to finally have got the decision, and being sacked, I do think it is absolutely wonderful. But clearly it's what happens next. So a bit of a rant, David, but a lot more confidence now. I think if we can just back this manager, who I think the way he carries himself, completely different to Russell Martin, and I think Thelwell as well. They had this smug, arrogant, we know, when everyone we could see, we know this club, David, more than pretty most, all that we've been through. They didn't ever put their hands up and go, oh, we have underestimated, we're going to change a wee bit, we're going to do. They just kept this kind of smug, yeah. So I think delighted that now they've been pushed away, and hopefully we can move forward now with a bit of sense now, yeah.
Yeah, I'm in a bit of a catch-22 here, because on the one hand, I do initially think, well done, they've made this decisive morning of the long knives, got rid of them, it needed doing, they haven't messed around. On the other hand, I'm saying, well, yeah, they're making this because they had to, because they made the mistakes of keeping these people in situ in the first place. So, do you get credit for fixing something you caused? That's the issue there. And I kind of tend to agree with David's point that the focus is on them because they've made a lot of mistakes since they've come in. Big mistakes. Now they are trying to unpick that, but the problem is with damage that it takes a while to unpick. You can't just suddenly turn around and everything is fixed. So they made the wrong hire with the manager. They allowed Thelwell to make the squad, which was not up to standard anyway, worse. Patrick Stewart, and I'm going to start with him, David. I think it was you and I who said on this pod, and I noticed a few people picked up on it, a deeply unimpressive figure. Look, CEO of a normal business, you can be a little grey, colourless person, right? Might actually be ideal for that. Football is a public business, and whether or not people like to admit it, an entertainment business. And at a football club like Rangers and the status we have within this country, you are news. Now, you are unlikely to be popular as a CEO. We're never going to love a CEO, but you should be respected, and people should admit, even grudgingly, that you've got something about you. He, to me, looked continually like a small man in a big man's suit. He continually looked to me like someone who himself thought, I am in the wrong, I've been cast in the wrong movie here. there were no public signs of improvement. And I know that people will point and say, well, you don't know what's going on in the offices. And that's right, I don't. And you don't know what future plans are being placed or what structures are being put in place. No, you're right, I don't. I'm only going on what I see from the team and what my experience is of being a Rangers supporter. And he hasn't improved anything. Nothing has got better under his reign. In fact, it's got worse. There needs to be, if you're going to be the CEO of Rangers, you have to understand you're going to be front and centre. Whether or not you want to be, you're going to be under the microscope. There is a public profile to this role that if you're not comfortable in, then don't take. But to me, the fact that he did this was yet another indicator of someone who simply did not get the stature of this role, of this club, or the demands placed upon it.
Yeah, I agree with every single word you say. I think I'm gonna caveat what I say here is I am not actually bothered where the new CEO is from. I'm not bothered what school they went to. I'm not bothered what team they supported as a boy or whatever. Okay,
Bar one.
bar one. Well, obviously, sorry, but the point that with Patrick Stewart was all of the things I've listed were in my view irrelevant because he. Have you ever watched Derry Girls? No.
I think so, yeah,
Yeah.
vaguely.
For anyone that's watched Derry Girls, there's a character in it
Got the
called
name of the
Catherine.
city wrong, Dave.
Yeah, London Derry Girls. Yeah, thank you. That's me down to the bottom of the list now for Heart and Hand. But essentially, there is a teacher's pet. There's someone that is essentially put in charge of the talent show, put in charge of all the various things because that's the role. But ultimately, zero actual character, zero backbone, zero morals. And what I would say with Patrick Stewart is, I imagine he probably was like a head prefect or a head boy of a school where they were like, "I'll put wee Patrick in charge. In charge. He'll grow into that blazer eventually." He still hasn't grown into his blazer, and he's probably in his 50s now. He was not only a deeply unimpressive individual; he was quite frankly a pathetic individual. You could argue there have been many people who have been involved in the club who have had various backgrounds who, for all of their faults, did their absolute best in what was a very challenging situation, whatever that was, whether that was under different owners or when these deals were involved and all these various things, and people did their absolute best. The challenge I feel or concern I had with Patrick Stewart was because he had been at Manchester United, it seemed to sort of give him this inflated sense of kind of self-importance. Let's be frank, Manchester United were, one of the biggest clubs actually at the time in the world. But if you want to see a sort of example of how not to run a football club in the last 10 to 15 years, go to Manchester United. And this is the thing where, and I'm sure we'll get to Kevin Thelwell in a second, but one of the second worst clubs ran in England was Everton. So all well and good, lads. How many players have we had who have came through the ranks of big clubs in inverted commas, who arrive with us, and you think like, how on earth did you ever even get in the youth side of whoever Man United, whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
It's exactly the same, and you can get away with things in Manchester, in Liverpool, in other cities. You simply cannot get away with in Glasgow. And it's a cliche, but conceding a goal is not a crisis at Rangers. Conceding a corner is a crisis. So,
Yep.
if you don't recognise that, if you don't recognise as well that we are universally hated by the political classes, by the media, by basically every other football team, club, and football authorities, if you don't recognise all that, where you can actually kick someone in the head and brass neck it out and get away with it a matter of a few weeks ago. I mean, I'd have loved to have seen, the strongly worded emails that were being written by the like of Patrick Stewart. So look, all I'm saying is, good riddance. Hopefully, like Russell Martin, we don't have to talk about it again, but I'll say it for a second time, and I think we all agree. Um, all well and good coming out in Sky Sports News and essentially telling us what we want to hear, but we're going to have to see proper action now and people put in place that are, I was going to say a step up, but My dog's lying beside me here, and I would probably put a blazer in Lila and give her a go at it. But yeah, that's me I'll come up for breath now. Apologies.
Yeah. Alan, Davey mentioned at the start about the fact that you can underrate Scottish football and the challenge that it is, because no one up here is going to argue that Scottish football is a higher quality than, say, the English Premier League. It's a silly argument no one would make, but it's different.
Yes.
And it's different from the English Championship. And I think there was an element of blinded by the big lights emanating from down there, the glamour, and that assumption that, it'll be fine because we have been there and we are. I think there was a condescension. I think there was a, whether or not overtly or whether or not consciously, I think there was a, look, come on, lads, we've played in the big league, so this wee league here is going to be no real challenge to us. And as you mentioned at the start yourself, that has been proven demonstrably to not be the case over the last few years, and historically as well.
Yeah, every time with players from bigger clubs, or even abroad and so on.
Scottish football works on its own rhythms, on its own quirks, and you have to get to grips with that. And it's difficult, and there will be a learning period, and you won't always get it right. But you have to be at least prepared to try to adapt to that. And Thelwell wasn't. No. The issue that we have now, and we can touch on the match against Livingston here, is that is a poor squad. Let nobody be deluded by that. Danny Rule, the reason that the fans are not being overly critical of him is we know what he's got to work with, and it is nowhere near the standard that we expect. And for me, the biggest thing about Thelwell, there's a few other things, and I'm going to touch on it in a minute, but the biggest thing was he looked at a Rangers team last season that wasn't up to standard, obviously, and he's made it worse.
Yeah, no, you're right, David. And I think the point that you made as well about them obviously underestimating Scotland, in a way, as supporters, we did the opposite of that. As David said, it's Man United, it's someone from Everton. We suddenly went, oh well, so that'll be fine. And clearly it wasn't. And in terms of it's Patrick Stewart as well, David, in business, I wouldn't have let him in front of big customers. I wouldn't let him speak at conferences. I wouldn't let him deal with the media. He just looked scared. And again, my chief executive, I want my chief executive actually to be really kind of strong and have gravitas, and he had nothing like that. Yeah.
But Alan, sorry to interject, but I think you've made a really good point there. He was put on, I think, was it the ECA last week, or he was put in some sort of committee or working group?
And it should be an admin guy behind the scenes, David, that kind of role, if anything. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and I look at the squad, and as I say, the people, eventually will start to look at Danny Rule, but I think there is a sense of we have given this workman very poor tools. And to ask him to turn it round is going to be very, very difficult. And I think that we'll discuss as a support. I mean, it will discuss why, what prompted us now. I think timing is always important. What prompted us now? And the fact is, Andrew Cavenagh sat at Danny Rule's unveiling and said, no, Patrick and Kevin are here for the long haul. They're going to fight to turn it around. So what changed? So you're right, David. Was it Danny Rule's assessment of the squad? Because I'm sure it wasn't particularly. Was it Danny Rule being handed a list of potential targets for January and saying, I don't want any of these, or I can't make any of these work? Was it, as I've seen speculated, the performance against Roma when Rangers were brushed aside like a group of children playing against their dad?
And how are we financially too, David? Sorry, the money that Thelwell has wasted on net 20 million, but what I mean is in terms of January, can we front load?
Yeah, we can buy in January. Right. Cool. There's money there in January, to bring in players. I think Rangers will bring in a minimum of 3, I think. Right. And by the way, don't take that as gospel, folks. Don't come back at me in February if they haven't, right? But that's what I've been told. Yes, whether or not it happens, we'll see. But there are players there that you're never going to get a return on, and I hate doing this because I feel like I'm picking on the lad, and I'm not. It's not his fault, and I do want to make that clear. But 8 million for Yusuf Chermiti is a vile signing because there is no track record whatsoever. So if you're going to try and get rid of him now, Who the hell is going to give you that sort of money? How could we legitimately ask for it? Knowing what we know.
And why was it signed off? Why was it signed off, David?
This is the thing. The club did sign off, so there's responsibility still with people there. But Davey, I want to ask you about this. For me, the two things I think Thelwell might have been able to work his way through this in terms of just keep his head down and get through it. The two things I think that probably did flag it up. Because I think he could have thrown himself on his knees, done a mea culpa, said, yeah, I underrated it, and I've signed some players that, I'm sure long term, but we need to get a different type of player in. The two things I think that, for me, were the absolute nails in the coffin were hiring his son and Yusuf Chermiti.
They were very much, they were two nails that essentially hung him on his own cross, of which I think he had probably erected himself, if we're quite honest. We've got to remember here as well that this doesn't necessarily solve our problems with just, cutting the head off the snake.
Doesn't make the squad any better, no.
Well, not look. It certainly doesn't make the squad any better. What it also does is it leaves us in a position where, make no mistake, Thelwell was out a week ago, if that, basically with the kind of state of the nation. Here are all the things that we're going to do. So that in a sense suggests that that this, I wouldn't say this wasn't in the post, but it certainly suggests that he had the ability to go and dictate. And I mean, I think from what we've picked up, Davey, he was dictating in terms of the direction of travel that various elements of the club were going in, and what was being said publicly about various aspects, injuries and transfers and various things. So it's interesting now that we've still got a situation where, and this is off the top of my head, we've got his own son, which, as I said, was essentially a noose he put round his own neck. We've got his own son in charge of recruitment. So if we think about it, that at the moment, he will be the person who is driving what we're getting in January. So unless a rabbit's pulled out of the hat that, we get someone, like an Edu, which we're not going to get, by the way, of course, but someone really high profile who's going to come in and solve all our problems in short term, that's not going to be a immediate fix. So we've got his son. We've then got the guy from Lincoln who he's brought in as a first team coach. We then have the head of the academy. So that's at least 3 members of staff that he has had a direct influence on recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
So with respect, and those 3 individuals I've never met, I have heard very little to anything about them. They could be great guys and really good at their jobs. But again, the management of the perception in terms of, without putting too fine a point in it, this is going to be one of the most heavily scrutinised transfer windows we perhaps have had in modern day football, because there is so much concern and legitimate concern amongst the fans.
It came across, David, it came across as if he was putting layers when he talked about, and I'm bringing this one in, and I'm now bringing that in.
There was definite.
It's as if he was kind of distancing himself a wee bit again, so that it just didn't feel right,
But what I don't understand, Davey, and I suppose it's almost it's a question for you, is where we've spoken at length about putting executives in place, paying them healthy sums of money, and I'm not going to quote what I heard Thel was being paid, but it wasn't a wage you turned down, to say the very least. We've got to bear in mind here that we've previously came from, I suppose, dare I say, almost a fan ownership model where we had fans who were incredibly passionate about the club, at least as passionate, as we are, if not more. But the difference is that they were all multimillionaires, and we debated at length the pros and cons of that model. We've now moved to a model where we've got, again, very wealthy men, very experienced in business, experienced in sport, but they live on the other side of the world in a different time zone. So the general consensus was, in a nutshell, this is great because we're going to put, people in charge who are maybe not going to have the same amount of emotion and, everything. This is going to be a land of milk and honey. But the reality of the situation is, I am yet, and this isn't me defending anyone that has gone before, but I'm yet to see any tangible evidence of an improvement on, dare I say, anything since
there
the
hasn't been.
ownership, since the new owners have come in, and that
There simply hasn't been, and it's a legit point. Yeah, we can debate the right model, the best model, but it's a little bit like, and Rangers have been guilty of this in the past, of running from one extreme to the other. So if you think, and I've long said the best way is to get in competent people, let them run the club, with the board providing oversight, which is often the way it works in the business world, right? You have a CEO who is empowered to go and make big decisions. However, it's a little bit like if you have a number 9 who isn't scoring goals, you don't decide, right, we're never going to play with a number 9 again. You get another number 9.
Yeah.
And it's like in squad recruitment, if you don't have the right people in the job, then it's not going to work, even if it is the right model for you. And I don't know if it is the right model. It's the one I think will work. I think the problem with the last lot is any enterprise, any business, I think you need people who have final decision. I think at Rangers you had 5 or 6 people who could go in and say, don't do that, do this. And staff would have to do it. And I think that led to a lot of confusion, and it led to a lot of compromise. And I think for better or for worse, you need to have somebody who is the leader and somebody who takes overall responsibility for.
And there needs to be clear objectives as well, David, in that particular role, and then the people under them, and everything then should be a case of let's
working
go back.
Towards that.
How are we doing against that?
But if you still hire the wrong people to begin with, which Rangers did,
you're not going to.
You're not going to succeed. But to me, it's a little bit like saying, right, we tried that, a director of football, so we
try something else now.
Yeah, we do something completely different. I don't think that's the case because, as I say, to use the footballing metaphor, if you've got a bad goalkeeper, you don't decide to play without a goalkeeper. You buy a new goalkeeper, or you get a new goalkeeper, and that's sort of where I am with this. The fact is that what you need is someone who. Here's the thing about Cavenagh and whatnot, and I've seen people say, right, when are we going to go after the owners? It's like, well, unless you've got 100 million and they want to sell, it's a bit pointless, right? It's not going to work. All you can hope with the owners is that they have learned from the mistake. And Alan, the one thing that they should absolutely have learned in the 6 months so far is what doesn't work. And the next people coming into the club need to be people who, when they sit down, they say, do you get this challenge? Because we didn't. And look what happened.
No, you're absolutely right, David. And I think it was interesting as well, even when Andrew Cavenagh talked about, even in the small period of time, as if Danny Rowe kind of gets it. Do you know what I mean? But as you say, it needs to be someone that does. And I take your point too. I'm not against this whole director of football. If they had have got the right director of football and not Thelwell in there in the summer, and he had then picked the proper manager, or what is he, head coach now, it could very well work. So it could be their last chance saloon, but they need to get, if they're going to come in again with I don't know if they've openly said that, a director of football, or whether they're then going to flip to something else. But
I don't think they are.
No, so to me, if you can get someone in that can do this job, because they talked about some of them potentially may currently be at roles elsewhere and things. So if you could get a good one, David, and they then put in better recruitment and give the manager the tools that he needs, then you could be onto something, yeah.
A frustration for me, Davey, is surely anyone coming in, they might not have direct experience in Scottish football, but surely you look at the last couple of years at Rangers and you say, right, okay, they've been buying players for these leagues, so that's not probably that doesn't mean we're never going to buy from that league again if someone comes up who's right, but still we need to look elsewhere. Right, they've tried this, for example, with Man. Surely you do that, and it just Thelwell didn't, clearly, because the mistakes that he made, the hiring of someone like Russell Martin, and we said that style of football won't work in Scotland because it relies a lot on teams coming out to play against you. No one does, so it won't work. These were not mysteries that you had to be in the club to figure out. As a football professional, I feel you should be able to look at the last 2, 3, 5 years at Rangers. You don't need to go back to 1872. You should, though, be aware of the environment. And to me, again, it smacked of arrogance.
Before is a completely different thing to anything, Premiership, Championship, or other country. The way it's refereed, the kind of physicality, the having to be able to kind of stand there and go to all these away grounds and so on and deal with it. And what they're doing is they're signing people, say like Asgard or whoever, who, yeah, he looks quite pretty as long as there's no people barging into them and so on. You actually, I mean, anyone can see it, Rangers. You need about 4 or 5 really strong guys who can stand there, won't get shoved off. So that you can imagine nowadays them all looking at the likes of a John Brown and saying, well, he's not really that pleasing in the eye and so on. But to win, and if you talk about business as well, you're looking at what the competition does, how can we do better than the competition and so on. We need to fill our team. People are just forgetting about we don't need pleasing in the eye and people they've come through all these various, we need people that can actually come on and just win domestic games. Ultimately then you can then start sprinkling some of the other players around it. And I feel regardless, unless we do that and we've got a strong physical Rangers team that when the ball gets even to midfield, it's not, oh shit, I've got to move it quick because someone's coming in. You need to have your kind of Ian Ferguson types. I'm sorry, going back. I've got the ball, you ain't taking it off me, and people that can control the ball and dominate games physically. And I just feel, I know that doesn't sound highbrow like all the way people are looking at it, but I'm telling you, if you can have a spine of a Rangers team where you've got that determination, oh, you bloody think so, things aren't going as well, it doesn't matter, we must win at all costs. That's it. And people need to, whatever happens next with the next recruitment as well, sprinkle me 3 or 4 of those guys through the team. A couple of really kind of dirty players as well who'll do anything. To me, that's the way to go. We've got too many of these people that, yeah, they look good in the academy, they look good here, yeah, they're doing all of this. For fuck's sake, it's Rangers, get in there. Everybody wants to do is stand up strong and dominate games. Sorry, old boy rant here.
The idea, I think you're spot on there, the idea that you can just copy and paste from another league and bring up here and it all go swimmingly just
doesn't work.
Isn't true. No. It just simply doesn't, and there's too much evidence of that. That's not, of course, saying that you can't take elements and that you can't learn from certain things, and that there will be players who can come in and be a success. But you just have to be aware of the environment that is there, as Davey mentioned earlier, both out with the football club and within it. The style of football, the refereeing, which is something Rangers
the mentality that you need,
challenge.
Characters, yeah.
And you need character. You need all of these things that we've spoken about before. Yes, it would be great. Our ideas are based probably in the past, right? So I'm not saying that you just wholesale take them, but you don't disregard them wholesale either. Like everything, you need to just select all the right elements and put them together. And I think Rangers have been very, very poor at that. I think that people who have been put into important jobs at Rangers have come with an attitude of condescension. They have come with an attitude of, this is very straightforward, I've done it on a higher level. The way I would argue it is, no, you've done it at a different level. Because it's almost how many times are we sitting watching a game in a WhatsApp group and we watch an EPL game, we go, Christ, it's like a different sport.
Oh, I mean, Arsenal Spurs yesterday, I was just sitting watching that. And
I've seen us play like Spurs a fair bit, right enough. But yeah, we do. We sit and watch it sometimes, and it's self-deprecating in that Scottish way. But there is an element of truth to it, because the way that we play when you are playing against Livingston at home on Saturday, you will require different skill sets to what you do in other leagues. And Rangers have singularly failed to recognise that, because we've had people coming in, as I say, from new owners to directors of football to CEOs to managers, let's not forget Russell Martin, and they've come in and they've thought, I know better. I don't have to do my homework. I don't have to do my research. I can put my ideas across, and I don't need to be aware of circumstance or environment. And it has cost us big time. And I think the frustration for fans is we have learned this lesson through painful demonstrations that it doesn't work, and yet in come a new batch of people, and rather than trying to absorb these readily available lessons, have just come in and went, no, trust that we know what we're doing, and it's been proven they hadn't. Yeah, I don't think it's binary. I think it's both. I think it's arrogance. I think it's not doing your homework. I think it's assuming you know best. And it's cost us time after time. Right then, folks, that will do us for this week here on the Heart and Hand flagship. Cammy will be here later in the week after we take on Braga in the Europa League, but before we host Falkirk at home next week. Loads more coverage of this on the site and etc. It's too much to get into for one day almost here. And you'll also be able to almost get a flagship part 2 with myself, CG Novo, and Stevie from Four Lads this week, where we'll get into it as well. So I just want to thank my producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Miles, and my guests, first of all, David Graham, and the aforementioned Alan Bradley.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, same for me, Big Davey, as well. Absolutely positive now going forward. But clearly, as you say, David, everything's all fine now, but we really need to put things properly in place over the next few months. So,
fantastic. Listen, thank you very much for joining us today, listeners. We'll be back soon. Until then, take care. Bye-bye, everyone.